Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'd like to thank you for taking our time to come to this conference. My name is Olatunji Okpe, and I noticed that a couple of people have been struggling with my surname for a while. Well, it is a Yoruba name, in case you're wondering, and you will find out eventually at some point where I'm from. Basically, why I'm here today is I want to take us a little bit of a journey. I want to approach this from a personal perspective and from excerpts from a book that I read recently. You might wonder, what does my personal story have to do with corporate governance or governance towards developing the economy and sustainability? Please be patient with me. We'll get there shortly. Now, the objective. What happened? Hello? Okay. The objective is to set an agenda for an economically, socially, and politically strong and viable country through the right governance framework. Now, the idea here is that you can take the corporate governance principles for organizations and superimpose it on the country. This we'll see in a little bit. But first thing, there are some factors or some elements required for nation building that we cannot take one and leave the other. It's like a tripod. I don't know how many of us are familiar with their native stools. If you take, they usually stand on three legs. You take out one and it falls apart. So let's go through this journey. I have 30 minutes, so I'm going to be rushing a little bit to finish. Okay. No. After the objective. No, not this one. Up, not down. Up. No. Yes, yeah. The short story. Okay. So in case you were wondering, I come from a family of Egungun worshippers. It's a village that a number of us are familiar with. We go through every day, but it never occurs to us that it's actually a village. And it's been a village ever since I was born. But it goes by other names, by other people. So the story here is, amongst the families making up the compound, or the family, or the larger family, you have Christians, you have Muslims. But we're essentially Egungun worshippers. The shrine is still there. The festival still happens once a year. We still pour libation, even though we profess other faiths. Over time, as we grew up and as we acquired education, and we moved up the economic ladder, we moved out of the compound. Now, the compound, usually, if you're familiar with the village compound, you have different houses inhabited by different families making up the larger compound or the larger family. So as we all went to school, primary school, secondary, university, get a job, start making it in life, you move out of the family compound. You move out of your house. Some of us moved over to the island. Some of us moved over to the mainland. Some of us out of the country. Growing up, before I left university, close to about 70 to 80% of those I grew up with live outside Nigeria. They come home once in a while. Some have never been home in the last 30 years. Some have never been home in the last 40 years. But those of us who are in Nigeria, once in a while, we drop by. We go to see the family compound. But one thing strikes all of us. We see how the compound is being run. All the owners of the houses within the compound, because they no longer live there, they have rented their houses, their rooms and their apartments to strangers, to tenants. And on getting to the compound these days, you see how badly managed the compound is. I never grew up in that compound to see a piece of paper on the ground. It was unheard of. But you see a mound of refuse in the compound. The compound is headed by a mortgagee, like most other compounds within the city. The mortgagee is responsible for leading the family, but he can't take decisions without the heads of the families. Now, how effective can your decision-making process be without the heads of the families? So, he grumbles. He can't issue orders to the tenants because the heads of the families are not there to call the tenants to order. Those of us here, he's not around. He's probably in France or he's in the US or something. So we can't do much. His children don't come home either. So till now, we just grumble. We can't do much. The mortgagee grumbles. He can't do anything. But the only time that is available for everybody to get together is the Egungun festival. But guess what? A lot of the family members have obligations elsewhere. So only those of us who are around, and some who still feel very strong ties to the village and to the compound, come round for the festival. I hope you see where I'm going with this. Then, that kind of situation, what kind of solution can you prefer? Or can you prefer to fix what's happening in the family compound? Then we progress. The situation is unresolved as we speak. Now, I want to share excerpt from a book by Professor Stephen Ellis. He wrote a book which sheds a very bad light on Nigeria. But I want us to take a critical and objective look at excerpts from this book and try to situate it within contemporary Nigeria. He was referring to Nigeria in the 40s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Can I go to the next slide? He's a British historian, Africanist. He's late right now. He's a British historian, Africanist, and human rights activist. So that we don't take too much time, let's proceed. The book is This Present Darkness, A history of Nigerian organized crime. That is a description of Nigeria. Next slide, please. Now, in 1947, please note the dates. Chief Obafemi Awolowo wrote that corruption is the greatest defect of the native court system. He complained that not only the judges take bribes, people use their connection to enrich themselves and avoid punishment for their crimes. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? Next slide. In 1922, Winston Churchill wrote to the Colonial Secretary in London, to Nigerian Governor General at the time, Clifford, asking him to ban certain types of letters called charlatanic correspondences. Charlatanic correspondences. This was because J.K. McGregor, then headmaster of Upwardle Institute in Calabar for 36 years, had discovered his students ordering all sorts of books, charms, and even portions from England, America, and India in particular. Does that sound familiar? This was 1932. Does this sound familiar? Next slide. In 1939, a Nigerian businessman based in Ghana named Prince Ekene wrote to the colonial government in Nigeria, complaining of Nigerian girls. Madam called Alice, who told the girls that they were going to learn a trade or get married. He concluded that the trade was very well organized and profitable for the ringleaders. Does that sound familiar? Next slide. In 1956, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa said the twin causes of bribery and corruption pervade every rank and department of government. At that time, the word awoof was already being used to describe how civil servants use their positions to enrich themselves. In 1952, an anti-corruption campaigner named Ayo A. Akak complained that Nigerians were abandoning farming for trade due to materialism and consumerism. Those are sound familiar. In 1959, there were 60,000 school graduates in the Western region. By the following year, the number had increased to 200,000. However, this led to a now familiar problem. By 1963, primary education was turning out 180,000 graduates a year, but only 80,000 of them could find jobs, according to the Regional Minister of Finance. The same minister also said he was looking for a method to crack down on school principals who were collecting money for students for a variety of services. In 1968, a Polish British sociologist named Stanislaw Andrzejewski coined the term kleptocracy to describe the system of government he found in Nigeria. He said Nigeria is the most perfect example of kleptocracy since power itself rests on the ability to bribe. Does that sound familiar? So what conclusion do you reach when in 1976-75, a report of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the shortage of petroleum products found that a lot of the petrol being imported into Nigeria due to the inability of the Port Harcourt refinery to meet local demand was being smuggled into Chad and Niger Republic. As soon as NNPC was formed, people swarmed around it and all sorts of people got crude oil lifting contracts. Does that sound familiar? In 1979, a British bank, Johnson Matthey, collaborated with the Central Bank of Nigeria to export huge amounts of forex from Nigeria on behalf of politicians like Alhaji Umar Diko in contravention of foreign exchange controls. The bank later collapsed due to unsecured loans to Nigeria and had to be bailed out by the Bank of England with £100 million in 1984. The first time the Bank of England had ever rescued a private bank in British history. It also led to the passing of the Insolvency Act by Margaret Thatcher's government in 1986. One of the directors of the bank, Masari Advan, ran to Nigeria in 1986, but returned to the UK in 2003 for treatment. He ran to Nigeria to avoid prosecution. He ran away from Nigeria back to London for treatment because he had cancer. Nigeria is not configured for economic development. Sorry. The issue there is that if we don't apply the principles of corporate governance within organizations and superimpose it on the country, things won't change. You have the 4 P's of corporate governance: people, process, purpose, and performance. When you recruit, you have a job profile. Do you recruit based on the job profile and job description solely? There's something we do. We call it the personality profile. That personality profile tells you the person that you want to hire must align with your vision for your business. If we take my personal story and the excerpt from the book of Stephen Ellis, and you align it with the definition of corporate governance, answer that question: is Nigeria configured for economic development? If it is about building effective mechanisms and measures, either in order to satisfy current social expectations or to satisfy the narrower expectations of shareholders, can we answer that question? If corporate governance is about effective supervision and affecting the way a corporation is directed, administered, or controlled, it is logical to infer the economic development and sustainability of Nigeria will be determined and impacted by the quality of governance, oversight, and control of the powers and authority of the managers of the country and therefrom the economy. So let's look at governance. What should be, if we agree that corporate governance within organizations looks like this, what should corporate governance within Nigeria look like? The government is supposed to establish direction and shape strategy through term development plans. When was the last time we had a 5-10-year development? Please don't tell me Vision 2020. Separation of powers. Shaping the relationship between the citizens and state institutions. Providing appropriate oversight of state, public, and private institutions. Protecting the constitutional rights and equitable treatment of all citizens and non-citizens. If we go by the address by the president of ICSAN a short while ago, and the disconnect between the aspirations of organized private sector and the provisions of that act, what would be your conclusion? Do we have our aspirations served by that policy? Do we have the aspirations of our shareholders served by that policy? Let's look at it this way. Governance is important to economic development in the following ways. It helps to ensure that your economy grows sustainably, consistently, in a structured manner. It provides your economy a better global rating. And it gives your investors, local and foreign, confidence in your ability to manage their investment or to protect their investment long term. It ensures that you have provision of capital at single digits, unlike what obtains now, and ensures ease of doing business. There's a video, I'm not sure, I want to assume that a number of us saw a video of a lady in Abuja who was traumatized by AMAC when they came to shut down her restaurant with guests inside, with patrons inside. The restaurant was shut down while they were there. Not because she was not entitled to open, not because she was not certified to open, not because she was unable to open, but because someone just needed to take something. And she was asked to drop 250,000 naira, even though she had a certificate that allowed her to operate. How does that behavior encourage citizen confidence, patriotism, and support for government's goals and objectives? How do we improve our standard of living and the value of our lives. A key question here, I've asked a couple of people this question. How many of us here in this room can afford a brand new car today? How many of us, okay, maybe I should ask, how many of us drive brand new cars? Maybe not, okay. Maybe a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. How many of us can afford to buy a house? How many of us can afford to build a house? And when I'm talking about building a house, please forgive me for those who live in the axis that I want to mention. Please forgive me. I am not referring to Mowe or Fada, Badagry, Amokoko, Ajegunle. I am not referring to those areas. Please forgive me. I'm referring to areas that preserve the quality of your life. I want to assume that every one of us here desires to have a good quality of life. There's something called the Standard of Living Index. I want us all here, after this conference, to take a look at that. They use it to measure the standard of your life. Then think about it. What foundation do you have for growth in Nigeria? What foundation? Any nation that aspires to grow grows on 3 pillars: education, industry, shared social values. Education is what will ensure that you have competent, skilled people, either from an academic perspective, professional perspective, or a vocational perspective. Regardless, it does not matter whether it's formal or informal. There's something about our educational system that is defective. If you have, let me not mention names, but some people are here that they might take it personal. Some people in the construction industry or in the real estate industry do not source their labor from Nigeria. I'm not mentioning names. They go to Togo, they go to Republic of Benin, they go to Ghana. And guess what? They do not mind the cost of bringing them down to Nigeria, providing accommodation for them, feeding them, and paying them salaries. Now, that speaks to the pragmatic posture of us as a people. We ignore the reality and choose to be pragmatic. The reality is that this is a danger that will come back to bite us. Then industry. The textile industry is where? Manufacturing industry is where? There was a processing company, there was a cocoa processing company. No, there was about 2 or 3 around Shagamu and Ijebu at one time. They are dead. We have continued to be a nation of raw material suppliers to the rest of the world. We farm, we waste all that energy, we produce crops of high value, and we ship them abroad. Switzerland produces the best chocolates in the world. How many chocolate companies are in Nigeria? In the whole of Africa, there are probably about 5 chocolatiers in the whole of Africa. South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Egypt, Ghana. Which other country? Not sure. About 4 or 5. The producers of cocoa make less than 10% of what the chocolate industry makes. If you take the banking industry, for example, our population is close to 200 million, right? If you go through the financials of banks in South Africa, in Kenya, in Egypt, you will be shocked at their bottom line. Compared to a country with close to 200 million people, our insurance penetration is 2.7%. South Africa is 24%. What's South Africa's population? 55, 52 million? 55 million. In 2018, South Africa sold 35,000 brand new cars. Nigeria, even though I'm not sure about that figure, we sold less than 5,000 brand new cars. So, where do we go from here? What kind of structure do we want to put in place? Where does the solution lie? Given its historical antecedents, should we leave everything to government? Please note something. Government in Nigeria is essentially made of 2 sets of people: politicians and civil servants. Civil servants come up with policies to guide the private sector that they do not have an experience in. How do you expect your interests to be protected? Politicians who manage the economy by default are mostly people who have worked as employees, not employers of labor, civil servants, and career politicians who do not have any other means of sustenance apart from politics. how does the desire or the thought process of people within that space align with yours? So you have double jeopardy. Civil servants who do not understand what goes on in the private sector, politicians who do not know how the owners of businesses feel. How many politicians do you know today? Those who have worked as governors, as ministers, and so on and so forth. How many of them do you know who run businesses or who ran businesses before they got into office? Will the aspiration of that person align with yours? If you look at the way organizations are structured, can you please, let me go to the governance framework for organizations. So that we don't take too much time. Down, down, down. Further. Further. Okay, hold on a minute. Education, industry, shared social values. Does it, do you notice something? Please look at this. Look at this slide. Do you notice something? You can fix education. You can fix industry. This is where the problem is. Shared social values. Can you buy it? Can you buy it? It's not a piece of equipment. Let's go further. Let's go further. 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 Yeah, thank you. The owner of a business wants his business to be a global brand, a national brand first, then a global brand. It wants to compete with its contemporaries outside the shores of Nigeria. So, it structures its organization along those lines. It provides a risk management mechanism. It builds the functionality of risk management into the organization. It further institutes internal controls. It introduces performance measurement. I'm sure a lot of us here can identify with this, right? Can we take this and superimpose on government as presently constituted? Do we have a clearly articulated strategy? Please forgive me for sharing this anecdote with you, but I just want to use it to illustrate this. When the former governor of Ekiti State came into office for the second time, he was approached by a gentleman called Chibayo Akoshile. I don't know if anybody here knows him. You know, Chief Akoshile was driven by that excitement that, Ayo Fayose is a man of the people. He's going to do what we want. He's going to do it. So he came up with this fantastic development strategy and presented it to Mr. Fayoshe. He said the first idea, the first inkling of the kind of trouble that he was because all the guys on the other side of the table were quiet all the time he was presenting. Not one question was asked. He said he would pause, hoping somebody would say something. He got to the end of the presentation. Still no questions. So he now asked the question. Your Excellency, this is the strategy we believe will drive Ekiti State into the 21st century. His response was, would this one happen in 1 year? All these things that you people do will happen in 8 years. If it's not happening while I'm there, I'm not doing it too. Anybody who is familiar with development, the agricultural industry, the cycle, the longest cycle for any agricultural crop is 5 years. You can start turning around agriculture within a year, within a 12-month cycle. You can extend that with some crops to 18 months. Now, if you want to extend from crops to processing, max 18 months to 24 months. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves, if Fayoshe was the governor of Ekiti State and he had that kind of mindset, what does that tell you about the others? I'm not implying that the others are like that, but if, as a governor who's supposed to represent me, thinks like that, where do we go? Will he be concerned about the operationalization of that strategy if he had accepted it, knowing fully well that it would need to bring the people, system, and processes into place, and to ensure the success, it would need to bring the stakeholders into that space as well. There's something we do called stakeholder mapping. If you want to implement a project in a particular area, you need to conduct stakeholder mapping because you need to know the people who can positively or negatively impact your project, just to ensure that your investment is safe. How many policies in Nigeria have been drafted with stakeholders in mind? A clear case is the address by the president. How do we ensure this happens? So what do we need to ensure that this happens? There's a concept that was shared by Soji Apampa called collective interest. Can you please go forward? Okay, look at this. Okay, let's go to that before they will come back to this. No. Forward. No. Down. Yeah. No. Back up, yeah. Collective action. No economy can grow without business working with government, without government working with business, or without stakeholders working with government. A typical example of the disconnectedness of government from what is happening was the recent NSAS protest. It provided a clear example of the potential of this country when a group of young men and women working in groups across 25 states delivered a protest communication for 12 days consistently, managing everybody that was there, feeding them, providing medical care for those who get injured, providing legal aid for those who are arrested. 12 days. And all this they delivered with less than 150 billion naira. 25 states. Anecdotal evidence suggests that at each of those protests across the country, you had nothing less than 500 people. In some states, you had maybe 2,000, 3,000. Lagos had thousands. Abuja had thousands. Port Harcourt had thousands. Plateau had 500, 800, 1,000. These young men and women managed that protest for 12 days under 150 million naira. Everybody, they fed, they were given food, drinks, water consistently, morning, afternoon, night, 12 days. There is no better example, or there's no better illustration of the potential of this country than that. If there's any other example, please, I'm open to learning. Please share it with me. So, we're looking at collective action. We need business, government, and stakeholders to work in tandem. And stakeholders here will mean that everybody in the society outside business will include institutions of social institutions, market women associations, the young man on the street, the young lady trying to conduct her business. Collective action will enable a system of incentives and sanctions, shared standards, strong monitoring and control, social capital and motivations that ensure the development and adoption of sound corporate governance in Nigeria. That if that is the solution to ensure that corporate governance works in Nigeria, it stands to reason that government cannot work in a silo. It needs business. Nigeria is probably the only country in the world that has individually strong people who excel and have the potential to excel in any part of the world that they find themselves in. But what confounds people is the inability of Nigeria to bring those people together and run this country and compete with the rest of the world. So if we do not have collective action Not your industry alone, not the manufacturing industry alone, not the processing company alone, not the banking industry alone, not the insurance industry alone, not the telecoms industry alone. If we do not see this as a collective challenge, we will still continue to fight individual fires. Please, I hope you recall my story about my village and my family compound. Until people get together and articulate their collective aspirations, draft a recipe for success, whatever framework that you put in place must include all those elements within the society that you have identified for you to drive collective action and get the kind of results that you aspire to. Please, let's go forward. The beauty of collective action is that it's a self-reinforcing mechanism, because it's your interest. It's a collective interest, right? If we begin to see if we begin to see that my interest is protected by protecting the interest of the collective, we can't have collective action. It's only when we adopt the principle of enlightened self-interest that my interest is protected by the interest of the collective. We need to subordinate our individual aspirations, our individual interests, and our individual desires and decision-making, our individual thoughts, under the collective. It is only when the country functions that we can grow. If we don't have a functioning country with respected processes, Nigeria has some of the best policies in the world. Some policies are just totally brainless. But overall, we have some of the best policies in the world. But implementing those policies will guarantee that power shifts towards the people. And I'm going to say prediction. The reason why we have such a situation is that the public officer in Nigeria, the politician, your presidents, your ministers, your commissioners, your governors, your reps, do not want to share power with the private sector. The reason why they are there is because the less discerning vote for them. The guy on the street who is comfortable with a bag of Indomie and a bag of salt and sugar and 500 naira does so because he does not have any other hope of where his next meal is coming from. And if we begin to address those issues, especially those we refer to as hoodlums, we are not getting anywhere. We need to be able to address, because they are also stakeholders. And until we start to recognize them as stakeholders, the ones who ensure that those guys get into office, your interest, we were taught in negotiation that it's your interest that matters. Do not take a position. A lot of us take positions This is what I want for my industry. Sorry, this is what I want for my company. We never think what we want for this industry to thrive. We often forget that we are a nation of close to 200 million people, and we are all serving less than 10% of that number. If we take a survey of everyone of us here, how many of us have an assured market of 5 million people? How many of us have 5 million customers? We did an intervention for a bank at one time. They had about 1.7 million customers. By the time we started that intervention, 900,000 of their customers had churned. 900,000 were not doing business. And they had not done business with the bank for about 2-3 years, and nobody queried why those accounts were inactive. So until we begin to see beyond where we are and see that this is a general problem. It's my problem. Let me find out if Mr. Body has the same problem. Let me find out if Mr. Olushisi has the same problem. Let's see how we can fix it. How many of us ask those questions? Until we begin to ask those questions, this is the recipe. If we don't ask those questions, we're back to square one. Collective action, a self-reinforcing mechanism. The quality of government or regulatory oversight will motivate companies to self-regulate and therefore the economy to prosper. So what do we need? Leadership. And I'm not referring, in terms of leadership, I'm not referring to heads of businesses. I'm referring to everybody here. Everybody in Nigeria would need to take leadership. Ordinarily, what would we desire for those we want to put forward as leaders? There are 3 critical qualities: competence, capacity, character. You can build competence. You can build capacity. How do you build character? When we recruit as consultants, we tell clients that let's look for educated young men and women who have the right attitude. Experience, not experience, though. The right attitude is the right attitude that will ensure that the guy does well at the job. It's the right attitude that will get you the passionate staff to drive your business. The same thing applies to government. How many of us have evaluated the character of those we push forward? Yeah. We put forward as leaders until we begin to apply this and tie it to your aspirations, via shared social values, we will not progress. The easiest way to break down a country, which is where we have found ourselves today, is to ensure that the educational system does not work. Your industry does not work. Your educational system educates you. Your industry empowers you financially. Your shared social values ensure that your country, your economy functions because it's in your collective interest to work towards it. If it does not happen, if you do not have a leader that sees that, we are not going anywhere. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.